Oh,
So do you like this? Do you like the YouTube thing? How it's different?
yeah.
It seems to be okay. I think.
I don't know. I think it's a lot. Facebook just, I don't know what it was about it. I just like the YouTube more.
No, I get it. I get it. I do. I do. It was good though when we were doing it the other day. It's too bad the internet was all screwy over at Spangler.
I
That's
know. That would have been cool.
But that's okay. That's okay.
Trying to get into the comments.
Yeah, just a second to get the machine going here. Get the old machine going right on time. By the way, I gotta give you one of these, man. This is the first time in a while you've been ready to go.
I'm all ready to go.
I'm putting my face on. I'll be there in a minute. Shut up, Darren.
God, I don't talk that way.
Anyway, yeah. So hopefully this weather holds up. It's very sticky out today, as you know.
It is.
But any day is a good day for beers, right?
Yeah, exactly. Trying to get our YouTube account here.
No, that's the one thing. It does take it's a little different. It does take a second to get into it.
Yeah.
But we'll see what's going on. But it's good though. It's fun. It's fun. It's nice it feels like the weather's cooling off a little bit, but it's tough to say. It's very sticky up today, as you know. Oh, I hear my voice in my ear.
Yeah, there we go. I had it like
generally.
Hey, Travis. Travis, it was nice hanging out with you at Gettysburg on the 4th of July.
Travis is the man. Travis is awesome. Yeah, that was good. Good to see you, Travis. That was a good time. I love his hat with all the emblems.
I know, it's really cool.
So now I'm at the point now where if I see a couple emblems together, I always think of Travis's hat. So so that's pretty good. So he's a good dude. So it was good. Yeah. It was good to get out there and see a lot of people. So obviously it's always good to go to Gettysburg, but that weekend was cool though. There was a lot of stuff going on. It didn't seem like there was too many people at any point. Like there was no like issues like getting into restaurants or bars or anything.
But we didn't go out to eat as much as we usually do because like we had the means to make our own food. And we weren't staying in the hotel, so we didn't see how busy it was. And we did stay in like just sit around the fire one night and stuff. Hey, Ryan said sobered up after Gettysburg weekend.
Yeah, well, that was a tough one. That was a tough one, Ryan.
Morning, David. David's on here. David was at our tour of Spangler as well as
it was good to finally meet David. He was definitely one of the people in the tour, and we'll talk about all the shenanigans for the weekend. But that was a good time. It's always good meeting people, and it's always good seeing different things but that's the best part of anything is going to a place like Gettysburg and meeting people and hanging out, emptying a few glasses here and there, which we did, by the way, Mary. I'm not going to lie. I'm not going to preface it with any sort of false allegation. We emptied many a glass last weekend, as Civil War people tend to do. But that's
contrary to popular belief.
Yeah, that was good, but that was pretty good. It was good to hang with Hessler and the boys. With his podcast.
They did their so on the Friday night they did like a kind of an event at the mine, and that was a lot of fun. Like Elsie was there. Elsie was also at our tour at Spangler, I think, as well, which is cool. But we met a lot of people at the mine on Friday night, which was really cool.
But it's cool to talk with like-minded people. It's always fun to to talk with people like the Hesslers and Gary and people like that. So it was cool. It's always cool going to those. If you haven't been to an anniversary, like a really good one, like a big battle where a lot of people are, I'd definitely do it. And I know Vicksburg was going on. I know. And there's a lot of stuff. Tullahoma, I know. But I mean, that was the 160th Gettysburg. It's a big deal. So whoever went out there was, I'm sure you had a good time.
No, it was cool. And the next big 160th is going to be Chattanooga or Chickamauga and Chattanooga, and September's for Chickamauga and then November for Chattanooga. And I think they're having events down there. Obviously not going to be as big as Gettysburg, but the one thing.
Oh, you don't know that. Could be.
I know it could be. I saw a few people like on social media shockingly saying things like, well, I'm not going because the round tops are closed. And it's like, there's so much, like, honestly, I mean, I didn't really miss not being up there because first of all, it would have been so busy and wouldn't have been able to enjoy it. And secondly, there's so many more areas to see, like Culp's Hill, East Cemetery Hill, and we went out to East Cavalry Field on the last day, and that was really cool. We saw a licensed battlefield guide giving a tour out there, and that's really good because that's an area of the battle that nobody ever goes to. And like out there, you have Custer and Jeb Stuart, and I think it's July 3rd it's being fought, right?
Right. You get guys like Chambliss on the Confederate side. You got that's a study in itself. And I know personally know people who work there who don't like going there because they don't feel as comfortable teaching it. There are some, obviously I mentioned Hessler. He's a really good guy at that, who teaches that part of the battlefield.
Yeah.
But but the problem with it is it's just past the Daniel Lady farm, and it's out of town and people can't walk to it. But if you haven't been to the East Cavalry Field, check that out because it's a lot of cool places to go. And so we're, it's a good opportunity. It got hot like it tends to be down there. So people don't like to be out there too far. But because if you go to East Cavalry,
you're way out there. Yeah. And David just mentions that I'm pretty sure I've got the wife talked into the Cocktails and Cannonballs event, which we announced this a few days ago. We are, just real quick, we're partnering with the Civil War Museum in Harrisburg, which is about maybe half an hour from Gettysburg, to be part of their Cocktails and Cannonballs event in September. We're going to be doing trivia there, but they're going to Union Cigar is going to be there with a cigar bar. They're going to have different drinks, different food, all this other stuff. And we're really thrilled to be partnering with them for that. Yeah.
They used to be called the Blue and Gray Gala. They changed it to Cannonballs and Cocktails, Cocktails and Cannonballs, I guess it is. Yeah. But it's going to be a ton of people in period gear. They're going to have period food. They're going to have a live night cannon demonstration. They're going to at nighttime. They're going to fire the cannons off. We'll be doing trivia. They're going to have cigars. They're going to have wine, beers, cocktails, and it's going to be a real festive Civil War nerdgasm event. And all they charge, I think, it's $75 a person, but every
$120 a couple or something.
Right, but every nickel that goes to support that National Civil Museum in Harrisburg. And if you've been up there, it's definitely worthwhile going. If you haven't, you've driven through Harrisburg, you can see it on the top of the hill next to that big flag up there. But Mary Beth Karakis and those people who run that asked us to be a part of it, which is great. But I think it's going to be a good time. It's September 22nd. I think it's a Friday. I think.
Yeah, right? It's a Friday.
Right. So if you're in the area, come by because I think it'll be a lot of fun. I think a lot of cool people will be there. I'm looking forward to that night cannon demonstration. Seeing the cannons go up at night. That's gonna be cool as hell.
Yeah, they're gonna do a demonstration for cannons at night, and they're great people there. We've worked with them on a couple different things, and it's been.
And I told Mary Beth, if you want to spice it up, use live ammo.
Yep.
She won't. They don't want to do it. But I tried. Fire on Harrisburg.
It's a lot of fun.
Just like Yule, but no, that'll be a good time. So hopefully people can get out for that. But whenever one thing, when you go to a place like any of these major battlefields, and I just don't mean Gettysburg, go on their website and see what's going on, because a lot of times they have little events going on that people don't even realize. It doesn't have to be a big
demonstrations, or they have Ranger talks and all that. Oh, good morning, MJ. We got to hang out with MJ in Gettysburg as well.
We did. Speaking of MJ, she had a really good presentation.
Yeah.
A couple of them actually, and part of her group right over there at Unity Park, and you can learn about. Obviously, she did a speech on Howard and Hancock
and the myth,
and as well as Pauline Cushman, that's the spy. But that's what's great about these things and these people is people volunteer their time to help teach what their passion is.
Yeah.
And so when you go to these places, check out what's going on because it's a great opportunity to learn. And just like we said a million times, just sitting at the bar and talking to people or catching up with people and just hear what's on their minds. That's what makes these battlefields cool. Really is.
I completely agree. And today is the anniversary of Monocacy. That's another great battlefield to visit. And they often have one of their rangers there is Matt Borders, and we've seen him present before. And he knows his stuff about Monocacy. And it's and all of it is it's free for the most part. We just walked out of the visitor center and there he was giving this presentation about Monocacy. And Monocacy is a fascinating battlefield to explore. And despite some of the discussion that was happening on Twitter this morning, the 1864 election, our opinion is that it is, it's such an important election, and you can't downplay how important the 1864 election is, and therefore how important, what Lew Wallace does at Monocacy is for helping with the war effort,
absolutely. I mean, that's the thing is it's eye of the beholder, and history is all about interpretation. And somebody might say, Gettysburg is a turning point. Some people say Antietam's a turning point. I've gone back. My personal opinion is a turning point is May of '64 when Overland basically gets going, and Grant decides to target Lee instead of Richmond. That's my personal opinion, but everyone has their own opinions to it.
Yeah.
But I think suffice it to say, since we'll talk Monocacy real quick, if that army gets through Breckinridge, Gordon, all the fun lovers over there in that point, if they get through and they get to Washington, of course they're not going to hold Washington.
No.
But you got to remember, I don't know if you remember, Mary, we did an episode on Cold Harbor. You've probably forgotten by now. It was almost 2 weeks ago. But you remember Grant was running into problems with Union troops numbers himself. So he's pulling people, 2nd Connecticut, 8th New York, from that hard artillery down to into the infantry. We talked a lot about that. So the forts were vulnerable. And if they do get into Washington, they're not going to hold it, of course, like we said. But going into the election, just a few months before, the visuals of President Lincoln being forced to evacuate and give up the city. I mean, that's the thing, is everything, if you read Longstreet's memoirs, you read a lot of the papers, they put so much on that 1864 election. And so that's why they say it's the battle that saved Washington. And
because I mean, even if could you imagine what the press, especially the Democratic press, would have done to Lincoln if Early had gotten to Washington even for just a few hours? Oh, Frank's on here. We got to hang out with him.
Frank, we walked. Frank was one of the people in our group along with Lisa. Oh, hey, Jim. Jim's on here too. Jim, be careful. Your wife's online, so be careful what you say. But we walked Pickett's Charge on the anniversary at pretty much the same time.
It was really, we walked out with Jim Hessler, and he put a hat on this walking stick at the end, which was really cool. But it was great. Like we were, and it was really hot that day and stuff. But Frank mentions he stopped by Monocacy on his way to Gettysburg, and he said it was really interesting.
If you go to Monocacy, that's the thing too, is first of all, it's a beautiful vista, and it's got a couple of different parts of history. It's got the Lost 191 Order in the Maryland campaign, but also the battle primarily, if you can go down to the river, okay, and the Monocacy River, and you can walk across, and you go to that Worthington farm, you follow the footsteps of John Brown Gordon, and you swing around to where Breckinridge guys attack at the Thomas farm, when he's pushing back on Jim Ricketts' 6th Corps, and you can see the visuals because it's pristine. And you realize what a good job Lew Wallace did in just slowing them down. And it cost me, it's actually, they say 24 hours, it's really 48 hours.
Because they got banged up at Blair's house.
Right.
And they were all hung over the next day.
And they had to wait an extra day. So it's really 48 hours. In the meantime, Union troops are coming up from the 6th Corps. And that's why Fort Stevens happens. The Battle of Abraham Lincoln is up there. So all the stuff plays into it in real time. But again, if people want to say it's unimportant, that's fine. That's their opinion. Yeah. I just think that it was it was one of those deals where if Lincoln had they take Atlanta, they take all these, Fort Fisher's coming, all these battles, and then you suddenly see Confederates drinking all the sweet tea in Washington, D.C. on the eve of the election a few months before. They call that an October surprise in the political world. And that's what that would have been, even though it was in July. So personally, I think it's important. And if people don't, that's cool too.
I do too. And I think sometimes it gets downplayed because people don't want to think about what the consequences of it could have been. And like, it just, I don't know, the more I study it, the more of an appreciation I have for Lew Wallace. And too, like, you have to think personally, he is like being asked to come out of not really the doghouse. He's been in, Cincinnati and stuff. And, then they're like, dude, we need your help. And he's kind of been in this obscure figure since Shiloh, since he was Grant's scapegoat, which is that's my opinion of it. Grant needed someone to blame, and he couldn't blame Sherman. He blames Lew Wallace. And Wallace has to come out of basically they're bringing him out of the bullpen, and he's ready to go. And
he's like Arnold Horseshack. Pick me. And they don't pick him. They finally do. They finally do out of basically necessity. Because I mean, you
can't have Franz Siegel doing it. I'm sorry, but
well, you have this mental image of the Union with all these troops that are just endless. Yeah. And by the time you get to summer of '64, I mean, the bullpen's getting empty. Yeah. There's only so many guys on the bench left.
Kind of like the Cleveland Indians bullpen. Torrey Guardian.
Ew. Yeah, well, by October probably for them. Although you guys don't see October ever, so I guess it's tough to compare it. Explain that to you, but
my fault. We're in a shitty division.
Anyway, I'm going to be going about that. But the reality is, you do have a situation where you always talk about limited manpower in the Confederacy, and that's an absolute truth. But there was limited in the North. And the idea that you could just go to the soldier store and make some new soldiers up for Grant, and it's just not really accurate. I mean, he was starting to pucker a moment himself a little bit with these troops. I mean, when you're pulling the heavy artillery people out with no experience to fight front line at Cold Harbor, it shows you a little bit. But they did well, though. They did well. You can't argue with that. But that's the truth, though. That's the God's honest truth. Take us, please.
AQ mentions that Monocacy, she considers Monocacy the true high watermark of the Confederacy. And I think I do agree. In some ways, it definitely was, because of, you're getting this close to DC. It is, I mean, Monocacy is a victory for the Confederates because they do eventually break through, but Wallace was that speed bump that slowed them down. And I mean, even and I've talked about this a few times on here, you have that dinner that Wallace and Gordon have years later, and Wallace is like, "You kicked my ass," and Gordon's like, "Are you kidding? You slowed us down. You stopped it." Like, they were Early and Gordon were quite confident they could get into DC. And I think they weren't expecting to take it, but they full well knew, if we can get in here even just for a few hours and fuck shit up, we're good, right?
It was political. I mean, you've got John McCausland doing his cavalry things. He's gonna go back and burn Chambersburg. So, and then you end up with that Valley campaign where the hero of the Valley, Phil Sheridan, Miranda's friend there, is gonna take care of them. But that's the thing, is it these battles, when you look at them, you can't look at them in a vacuum. You've got to look how they progress chronologically. And Monocacy, it leads into Fort Stevens. They fall back to the Valley, and then you have all that stuff that's going on there. Cedar Creek, you have everything going on again at Winchester, and that's what's cool about it, is they all go into each other. So after after the Union basically is pushed out of the Valley, they're going to come back in, and you're going to have those Valley campaigns again. Except now Stonewall's gone, right? So you're going to have a different set of people. And the results obviously a lot different. And
David just said, "Ugh, Sheridan." Which, I agree. I don't like Sheridan.
No, Sheridan. You know what? Sheridan was what he was. He was that angry short guy everybody works with, who's just a dick. That's who he was. And he
what did you say about him? He's like when you buy like 10 lottery tickets and lose, and you win on the 11th.
That's what. I mean, this is a guy who would lose 8 out of 10 times, but he would win just in time. He's like that pitcher you bring out of the bullpen, he sucks, then you're about to release him, and you finally put him in, and he shuts everybody down. He goes, "Shit, now we got to keep him." And that's what happened with Stones River, Cedar Creek, and that's how he was, Jeb Stuart. But he screwed up a lot, and he's probably, for my money, the most incompetent general the Union had, and that's saying something.
I agree. The more I study him, I feel the exact same way about him. On the other side of the Confederates, you have Gordon, who MJ says was a badass. Like he
was.
Oh yeah,
I mean, John Brown Gordon. I mean, they won Monocacy, the Confederacy. I mean, Lew Wallace, despite what people think, didn't win that. They did give. I mean, you're talking about a 3 to 4 to man, 15,000 to 4,000 advantage. So they weren't going to win. Fort Stedman is probably the only thing Gordon ever lost as a commander. When he was with the 6 Alabama fighting there at Seven Pines. I mean, this dude was a real deal. I mean, he was a hard charge and some bitch, as they say.
Yeah.
But he did it. He almost did everything right, and he did give credit to Wallace after the war with a lot of this stuff.
I think it was just because of what it slowed them down. Here we have a Howard reference, Grant, and Howard was like a track coach for his team of runners. We'll just wait for our next episode.
Oh yeah, we go with this one now. We're going to be talking about old Howard. Yeah. But I think people, Howard isn't easy. It's a low hanging fruit to go with him because of Chancellorsville. But if you look at the rest of his career, we're going to focus primarily on the post-war Oliver Otis Howard. Yeah. You'd be surprised the things that the dude did. I mean, he really, really did.
Yeah, so we'll talk about that. Even right after Gettysburg, which is where we're going to pick the story up and go through that, his time in the Western Theater. But we're going to focus on the founding of Howard University, his time on the Freedmen's Bureau, which was made very difficult by, shockingly, Andrew Johnson and even Stanton. Shocker.
And you want to talk Civil War bromances. One bromance that people don't really think about ever is the one between Howard and Jeb Stuart at West Point.
Yeah,
I mean,
they were very good friends.
they were closer than old Winnie Boy was with Armstead. History teach you. It's not quite like some of the others we've talked about with Hancock and Heath and people like that, but that was a real one.
Yeah.
And this is really before the Seminole Wars. This is before he got the religion in the head.
Yeah.
This
was
is prior
happened
to
to him in Florida. And we were talking about it yesterday, and we think something happened to him during the Seminole Wars, that he saw some stuff that was just like really bad, dark stuff down there. And he came home and he found religion, basically.
Yeah. I mean, Howard was a superintendent at West Point for 2 years later in his life. I mean,
which Sherman was so against him being appointed at West Point. And the one thing Sherman did not like about Howard, and he point blank told him, was he's like, I don't like your way of thinking. Meaning Howard was very forward thinking for his time.
Mm-hmm.
There's a reason he was sent to negotiate with the Native Americans. Now, it doesn't all turn out that great, but he was one that was able to negotiate with them.
Well, Howard gets a lot of credit, and we'll talk about him after we do this next time, but just spitball with Howard here to get you all excited about Howard. But Howard gets a lot of credit for being progressive to the blacks. But one thing he does not get credit for is how progressive he was to Jewish soldiers. And people don't study that. There's Order 11 with Grant, and there's a lot of dark stuff with that. But he had a lot of Jewish German soldiers in his corps, and he was very supportive of them when a lot of people weren't.
Yeah.
So he definitely had a more progressive mind with a lot. And he's an interesting study with that, because we talk about the anti-Irish sentiment. There was a substantial anti-Jewish sentiment in the Civil War. And Howard was one of the few, he might've been the only one actually, who was very progressive towards that thing too. And so I think that's one of the things you got to give him credit for too. Yeah. We'll talk all about that.
Yeah.
But that's but he's an interesting study. He's more than just what happened at Chancellorsville. He's got a fantastic overall history overall, and so we'll talk about that.
We did talk we tweeted a photo or a picture this morning that we found from Bowdoin College, and it is a drawing that Howard did in 1861. And he's got him it's like a self-portrait of him, but then his two kids, and then he's got his wife in there, and he's written below it, "Who is this?" He had and I read an article recently, you read the same one, that the guy remarked that, Howard's a Christian, but he also had the typical Maine sense of humor on him.
Yeah.
As well. And it shows in his memoirs. And Howard's a very, he loves his kids. He writes them all these letters, and you read it, he's like, "Oh, I miss you." And he always says, he closes one letter to his daughter where he says, "Say hi to Orestes for me." And Orestes was their pet dog. And I just thought it's reading his letters to his family brings such a human aspect to him that, I don't think, you have to read the letters that they wrote, just like the letters that Meade wrote his wife as well. He's very loving to his wife in those letters. Another thing we're going up to Burlington, Vermont too.
Yeah, we'll be going there in a couple of weeks. We're going to be going to the we're going to be going up to Burlington. We're going to see where he's buried. I'm going to try to make sure Mary doesn't sneak a shovel into the cemetery, and then we're going to see a lot of cool stuff. The church that he went to every single Sunday, and there's that. Speaking of that church, there's actually a cool story about that church. When later in life, Howard, he would go to that church every single Sunday, and he was very religious still at that point. And there was a story of an old black woman, and she was old, and she couldn't quite make it to the altar, and to go up to the altar. And there were people in the church who were kind of laughing at her.
Yeah.
And so he gets up. You know what he does? He helps walk her to the altar.
Yeah.
And back. So little personal stories like that about these people are really cool to talk about. But
that's what we're going to be talking about with him. And just kind of a lot of that's because the one thing we get a lot is what did he do after Gettysburg? He did so much, not just in the war, but, and he lives a long life. You think about it, Sherman dies in 1891. Howard is one of the ones that planned his funeral. He lives until 1909.
Yeah. And I mean, he grew up, with a small black kid.
Yeah.
And so he was kind of indoctrinated in that. And he was always unlike a lot of these people like Longstreet who kind of went the other way.
Yeah.
Longstreet, this is a guy who was raised by Augustus, his uncle, hard fire eater type of guy.
Yeah.
And so as the war goes on, Longstreet, he obviously gets hit a lot by the Lee people, and justifiably so in some cases. Mm-hmm. But this is a guy who was very much into whatever it took to win. And we mentioned a little bit ago, we were talking Monocacy, Petersburg, right?
Yeah.
You know what Longstreet wanted to do? He wanted to go to find the rich people in Richmond and steal their golds, and then use it to buy food. He was like the Rambo Robin Hood. He wanted he wanted to like steal from the rich and use it for the military. And Lee's like, no, we can't do that. That's impressment. And so he would do literally anything it took to help win. But Mary, there's an old Meatloaf song, right, that says, "I would do anything for love, but I would not do that." Remember that song? You know what the one thing he would not come around on?
Yeah, what's that?
I'll give you a hint. It was what Patrick Clayburn wanted.
Oh, right? Yes, the emancipation.
So that was where he drew the line. Now they came around to that a little bit later on, but it just goes to show that's how they were lines that these people did. But I mean, these people are all fascinating studies, because if you study them as people, you can see their personalities almost on a dime change. We talked about guys like Rufus Dawes, John Brown Gordon, even Lee. You can see how they change as they get older, how their perspectives change. That's why it's important to study the people. That's why it's always
the evolution, and we'll talk about that too in the Howard episode from a military standpoint, that, he is a guy that evolves, learns from his mistakes, and becomes a pretty solid commander by the end of the Civil War. And he's, got the respect of Sherman. He's got the respect of Grant. Mm-hmm. Lincoln really likes him and was the one that said, "I want you to lead the Freedmen's Bureau." And then Johnson made his life a living hell on there. And we'll talk all about that in the episode. And MJ mentions that she received some good feedback from her program last week, and people were surprised what a myth it was about the Cemetery Hill drama. And she truly enjoyed sharing the first person account. Well, MJ, you did an awesome job with it. Yeah, MJ, we went to see her. We put it on it's on our Facebook page for the podcast. But she talks about the myth surrounding, just the fact that Howard and Hancock didn't really fight on East Cemetery Hill. It was quite cordial between the two of them, and how it kind of began after it. Well, what was said afterwards.
If I might have the dates wrong on this, Missouri, I get in trouble. I'm going to try it anyway. If you're coming down for the Cannonballs and Cocktails weekend of September 22nd, I think MJ said she's doing her thing the next day down there, right? Yeah. The 23rd. If you get a chance to see MJ speak, do it. It's really, really cool. She knows her stuff, and she tells it in a good storytelling type of way.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of people are surprised at some of these things, because, if you don't study this, people here study this stuff on a higher level, but most people don't. People, if you've even heard of Howard or heard of Hancock, be surprised. I mean, people who don't.
Well, if you've heard of Howard, odds, and you don't really, and it's just kind of a high level overview, you're going to be like, oh, he was the guy whose corps was routed at Chancellorsville, and then he didn't have a very good day at Gettysburg. And the other thing I want to look more into, and I probably will once I start researching my book for Howard, is just the Doubleday thing. Because my God, there's some people that are like Team Doubleday, and they will not back down from that, and they go at Howard for that. And it's like, maybe Doubleday was kind of a dick.
Doubleday. I mean, he was butthurt when John Newton took that first court. I mean, there's a lot of history with Abner Doubleday. Although I will say, speaking of Gettysburg, people underestimate that the dude had a very good day at Gettysburg. He really did.
Yeah.
And he was certainly, by holding that 6 Wisconsin in reserve the way he did, it helped foil that railroad cut. So it's easy to rip on him, but again, every one of these dudes has good days. I mean, you can, even Burnside, you can make a case for him on certain things, but that's the way it is, though. Yeah. But I think it's definitely worthwhile seeing as many people speak. We had an opportunity on last week to go to the rededication of the flagpole at Blockers Knoll, which is where Barlow's stuff is now, and that was really cool because people don't understand the Reader's Digest 101 versions. Barlow moved his troops up, created a salient, got his ass kicked, and stupid him, and he gets hurt. But when you study the stories, these Connecticut troops and what they did, to fight guys like George Doles and Edward O'Neill and everything going on, you realize the heroism of these people. And yeah, it doesn't work out all the time. No, but you know something? It takes a different level of person to do that. And that position is great if you don't know that Gordon's coming behind.
Yeah.
But I mean, that's right, exactly. But that's the reality. So how can you attack him? And so we talked about the whole thing. Read Jim Poola's book, Under the Crescent Moon of the 11th Corps. And I know we're big 11th Corps apologists. I get that. But read it because
we're apologists. I think.
Well, no, I know. You tell it the way it is. But I mean, what I'm saying is that if you read the stuff, there is a different side of it. And that's why don't get pigeonholed into thinking one way or the other, because the truth's always in between. That's the way it always been, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. And you know, the one person we got to meet at Blotcher's Knoll, what is now Barlow's Knoll, was Stu Dempsey, who's a licensed national guide, and he knows his shit about the 11th Corps. And we got to go up and say hi to him and talk to him for a few minutes, and that was really cool. I really want to do a tour with him. He was on Battle Gettysburg podcast probably 4 years ago now, I think, and he did 2 episodes about the 11th Corps, and it was what started getting me really roped into learning about them more. And he goes all the way back to when they were Blanker's division, very early in the Civil War. And he, you know, the history is just so fascinating. And he tells it, he's a very good storyteller. But this is a guy like Stu Dempsey who he went over to Poland, I think is where Chrzanowski's from. And he went to the village he was originally from and asked the locals how to pronounce his name properly.
Yeah.
And it's not Chrzanowski, it's Chrzanowski, right?
Yeah, it's like if you follow college basketball, it's like Mike Krzyzewski. It's just the way it is. They called him Chris because that's obviously the way it looked. But there's a lot of obviously Tolliver is the one that people mess up the most. It looks like Taliaferro, and of course
we were going to do the episode, and you're like, it's Tolliver.
Taliaferro.
MJ brought up the rap battle. She says we have to do that in East Cemetery Hill.
Yeah, we didn't get a chance to do that. So maybe that weekend we're there in September, we can do that, because
we can practice like one night for it.
Oh, there was some good times at Gettysburg in that backyard this past weekend. There was some shenanigans afoot at the Circle K in that house. That was a good time. But it's always fun doing that stuff.
Yeah, no, it was a great time there. It was awesome to be there for the anniversary, especially to walk Pickett's charge. You know, pretty much at the time that it happened. Now it was hot and humid, which it was like that too. And it was really fascinating. AQ mentions that Stu is very cool. He helped champion my article with Gettysburg Magazine for next year. So that's really cool. AQ is going to have an article in Gettysburg Magazine next year.
I saw that. Our very own little AQ is going to be writing for them. Right? That's going to be big time.
It's really cool.
Promote the hell out of that for. But that's pretty cool. But no, it's definitely good to be able to do that and see and to see how it is. Let me read some comments, because I never do it. Oh, Elsie's on here. What's up, Elsie? Simply put, first day was outnumbered. Imagine they were outnumbered 27,000 to 17,000 Confederate to Union, which is a pretty big number. But when you consider the fact that Confederates did almost everything wrong that day and still won the day, it shows you how important those numbers are. But 27 to 17,000, full 10,000 difference in men that first day at Gettysburg. That's pretty good. Mm-hmm. But again, it's all community. We talk about the big three. Remember, communication, terrain, and weather. Communication. You know, you talk about Ewell. They say Gettysburg was his first battle, but second Winchester actually was, but he's up at Gettysburg. I mean, he's beyond up towards Harrisburg, that area, Carlisle, and he gets that order to fall back to the Gettysburg Cashtown area, which is 14 miles in difference, right? And he's got that great line when he says to Campbell Brown, does the general have anybody in his staff who can write an intelligible order? Yeah. Somebody wrote it down. But it just goes to show, because he was a guy who was under Jackson, so he was used to getting very specific orders.
Yeah, Jackson was very specific in his orders, and Lee was very vague.
And Lee was a macro manager. He was somebody who he could tell you what he wants done, but he wouldn't tell you how to do it. So that was a big difference. And so that shows the difference in having two, I don't want to say junior commanders, because they had experience, but trying to run a corps under Lee, when you kind of had to decipher what he wanted, because Lee was aloof at certain times. He wouldn't give you specific orders. He wouldn't tell you, I want you to do this, do this, do this. He would tell you just to do it, figure it out.
Yeah.
And if you're an experienced like a Longstreet or a Jackson or one of those, or a Stewart or one of those guys, you loved it because it gave you leeway. But if you were a
Yeah.
new guy like Yule or Hill,
But then again, some people just need very specific orders, right?
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing wrong with it, but I mean, he did, so then the famous, take the Hill of practicable, but don't bring on a general engagement. That whole thing, people talk about that for years and years, still talk about it. But again, it's a different thing when you look back now than in real time.
Yeah.
But I always thought that was a tough spot for you. It really, really was,
Yeah, I think so too. And Lynn mentions like, I'm so jealous about your Pickett's Charge walk. Looked amazing. It was really cool.
Yeah, we had to double quick it because somebody who remained nameless spent a little too much time at the Reed's Winery on Baltimore Street. And we were a little. I was with you. I was being kidnapped at the time. Actually, I was. I mean, we were sitting there. I kept telling you, Mary, we got to roll here. We got to get going.
We were with a few other people.
Yeah, I know. But we got there in time. We had to double quick across the field. Jim Samia stayed back. He stayed back to guard the supplies. And we caught him there. And then we had to double quick to catch up with Hessler and all of them. But that was a good time. But like anything else, the being able to do stuff and walk the fields and people know this is not rocket science. People know this, but it's just fascinating. It just gives you the chills sometimes that they get this very moment. And I know it was daylight savings. It was actually an hour before, but being able to walk around the same time and picture the field, it's just, if you can do it. And what's great about going to battlefields at the anniversaries is that the weather is usually close to the same.
The weather is going to be the same, the foliage. That's why I would, love to go to Chickamauga for an anniversary sometime as well, and also be in Chattanooga for an anniversary, because especially for those Ringgold Gap, because we were there, the foliage was all out, we couldn't get a good idea, like we could see all the stuff, right? But I would love to have been there at in November when the battle actually happened to get more of an idea of what it looked like.
One thing we have to talk about is the tour we did at Spangler.
Oh yeah, AQ just brought that, said it was awesome.
And thanks to the Gettysburg Foundation for that, because we had close to 70 people for that.
Yeah,
and we
was not expecting that.
We thought maybe it's funny how it all went down. We thought maybe 40 people, and there's no way to really gauge it. But I had a message from somebody over at the foundation the day before and says, "Hey, how many people are you expecting for this thing?" And we said 40. He goes, "People have been coming up to the desk here at the visitor center trying to sign up for this. And there's been like 50 people have come up here. They go, we don't have the parking for like 1,000 people here. So how many people do you think you're going to get for this?" And we're like, "Oh shit, I don't know." And they said, we're not going to tell you can't do it, but hopefully, please, hopefully the numbers are. And so we ended up with about 70 people. And Mark Blanchard, who's a friend of ours who ran the tour, is spectacular. He just is. He knows his stuff. He's very personable. He's a former English teacher, so he tells these personal stories, and he's very verbose and he's very vivid. And anybody who went along on the Spangler Farm tour if you didn't get a more of appreciation for the 11th Corps Field Hospital and the nurses and what happened there, then you ain't alive.
Mark gave it like it was one of the probably the best tour I've ever been on. LC mentions that too. That is one of his favorite tours he'd done at Gettysburg and had nothing to do with tactics. William Hammond was there. He's on here, and he said so thank you for that. And two, Lisa read her poem about the summer kitchen where Lou Armistead died. So thank you to her for doing that. That's how the tour ended, and that was really awesome. But it was great to see people come out to the tour. We both got to meet a descendant of somebody who was at Spangler in the 11th Corps.
That was pretty cool.
Which is like he just came up, like he came up and said, like, I'm a descendant. And that was really, really cool. And they have these cards, and Mark gave them out to everybody that was there. And there's like some war baseball cards basically, but they've got the stories of people who were there, like the nurses, the soldiers. And this guy, I think his last name was Koch or something, Koch was who his ancestor was. And it was just really cool to meet a descendant of that. Yeah,
it was. And Lisa reading her poem about the summer kitchen at the summer kitchen was really, really cool. I mean, that's the stuff's powerful anyway, but being able to read it there is just something. But no, but it was great. People came out, and the weather wasn't too bad. The weather held out. It didn't rain like we thought. There was a fear that it could rain. The next day, they closed the Spangler Farm completely for threat of rain, and it never came. So we got lucky with that. But it's nice. I mean, it's a nice private tour. You get to park on site. You're going to take the bus over. It was free. I think a lot of people appreciate it. We get to see a lot of people that day, and it was neat. And Mark does obviously a great job.
He does such a good job of like, you know, doing the tour and really making like people like it was, you know, very emotional. Like it was an emotional tour, and he's got a great way of making you can make connections with who was there. Lynn mentions that Lynn, one of our friends, she joined the foundation after the tour.
Oh, good. You know something? If anybody's not part of the Gettysburg Foundation, you can sign up. I would suggest you do it. I think it's like $35 a person for the year. But if you go to Gettysburg a lot, I mean, it gives you, by being a member of the foundation, it gives you free access to the visitor center, the David Wills House, things like that. And so, plus you're donating money.
Yeah.
But it does pay back. It really, really does. The Gettysburg Foundation, I've said this many times, is the straw that stirs the drink in Gettysburg. Yes. They actually own the visitor center, not the Park Service. The Park Service leases it from them. Wayne Motts is really I don't want to say the most important guy in Gettysburg, but he, being ahead of the foundation, is a very powerful position in that town. The Eisenhower Farm is part of the foundation. Yeah. All that stuff rolls through them. So if you're looking for, nothing against ABT or any of these people.
Yep, they're all awesome.
And the Gettysburg Foundation also acquires land, not just Battlefield Trust. And we love Gary, we love Tim, we love all those guys too. But if you're looking to donate to something, sign up for that, because it does pay you back, and you are supporting a great cause. And they're very good to us, and so we appreciate them. So that was pretty cool.
Yeah, no, it's and Lynn mentioned she had goosebumps multiple times in the tour. So did I, like, because it was just such a human tour. Like, you get to hear what happens to the Spanglers, like how they're up in this one room for so many weeks. You know, it's not just days, it's weeks, and how their land was ruined after because of all the horses, because there's too much ammonia in the fields now, right? And just, you know, how many men were in that barn.
Well, I mean, it's literally, it's like picture being on the subway and everyone's injured. And, you know, when we were inside the actual barn where that Rosecrans ambulance was, you can just picture, and it's the original floorboards, which is something too. I mean, but you can just imagine all those people lying out in the fields. And the other thing people don't realize too, it was also where where the reserve artillery was. So you've got all the guns. And, you know, you for every gun, you need 10 men and 12 horses. So picture all the horses that were there.
Yeah.
And Mark went into a very vivid description of the horse apples situation. Yeah. And how that must have been, and how the Spanglers petitioned the government for money back, and they got virtually nothing back after having everything destroyed. And then they're, you know, like many people in town, their apple orchard was turned into a cemetery where people like George Nixon were buried temporarily. So if you didn't get a chance, if you had a chance to go, thank you for going. But if you didn't go, next time you're in town, go to the visitor center, arrange for a tour of the Spangler Farm. And whoever does it, Mark does a lot of them. He'll tell the story, and you'll be floored at how powerful that place is. It really is something. It really
and
is.
And it's a sad place too. And I mean, it's like, you know, Carl Schurz is like, I think his quote was "too much for human endurance," which I need to get the book about Spangler Farm. But he said it was too much for human endurance. There's no word. They don't know if Howard ever visited. They suspect he probably didn't. I have my suspicions he might have gone out there once, you know, because he had a pretty vivid description of what the field hospitals were like. And he didn't say what he was describing, but I suspect it might have been Spangler that he was describing.
Well, I mean, the thing about it, though, is like many things, you can read the stories, you know, X amount, 50,000 casualties, but you get kind of numb to it because it's just numbers on a page. But when you visit the places that these people died at in just misery, people lying out in the field for days with nobody coming to help them. The triage system was at its early time with Jonathan Letterman. And so it's anybody with a soul, you get touched in a place like that. And Spangler Farm is unlike, and nothing against McPherson Barn or any of those places, but Spangler it's first of all, it's pristine.
Yeah.
and there's so many things that happen there, but just you could just feel that the pall, that negative, that
Yeah, it's just
energy,
such
that
a sad energy out
yeah.
there. And William mentions too, after scores of trips to Gettysburg over the decades, we finally signed up for the Gettysburg Foundation this past trip. So
Good for you, good for you, Bill. That's fantastic. So
yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, so just definitely do that. And we're not a part of the foundation as far as the
No, but we
podcast.
like
We
to
are
support them,
right. Yeah, there's no stake in the game for us except the fact that we know them quite well. We know Wayne well. We know all these people well, and for all the stuff they do, it's a yeoman's effort. And if you appreciate Gettysburg, I know people, oh, you guys talk about Gettysburg, but if you appreciate Gettysburg, the foundation is a great place to support. All right, but that's pretty cool. So yeah, but I think it was a great overall weekend. I hope people got a chance to go out and do some other things that weekend.
Well, you know what? Like, and Elsie mentioned this. It wasn't just talking tactics, because believe it or not, we talk about more than that in the Civil War field. We talk a lot about, and a lot of people, MJ mentioned it, a lot of people on here talk about the human side of it. And that's what we try to do with our episodes, especially the episodes where we talk about people. Like our first episode we focused on in general was, I don't know if you remember, was Lytle. And I would say Lytle was probably like, you think of any famous celebrity today, and that's what William Haynes Lytle, who fought in the Western Theater, killed at Chickamauga. That's what it was like when he fought. He was this guy who was known on both sides, well known all through the United States, and he gets killed at Chickamauga, and both sides are mourning him. Both sides are reading his poetry at night. He's protected by the Confederates until the Union can get over to take his body. But, telling that side of it. And I think you mentioned in that episode, wasn't there a story where he got kidnapped and he was like, you said he had to sleep over in feety pajamas or something?
Well, I mean, Ambrose Bierce is another one we talked about. There were a lot of people who, we would talk a little bit about Lew Wallace, but he went on to write Ben-Hur, of course. But at the time, there were some people who joined this. And so it's important to realize. But something, you have to study the human level, because something, the tactical thing, you can read Hardy's book, you can read Dennis Mahan, or all these people, Clausewitz or Jomini. Who cares? The story is a human story, because something, none of us, unless you went to West Point, you're in the military, can relate to Hardy's tactics or all that stuff. But we can all relate to the human stories, right? And that's the important thing. And with this, the Civil War was a lot of things, but what it was, one thing it really was a story of the human spirit, because they're volunteers for the most part. Yes, I know there were regulars in the Union Army, but for the most part, these were volunteers who signed up for different reasons. They were all part of the same town, sometimes same family members. The Futch brothers we talked about for the Confederacy when we had Carmichael on, but when you really get to that level, it's a compelling story to study. Right. And it's the logistic things is good to a point to help understand how the clock works sometime in some of these battles. But when you read some of the soldier diaries, you read Small, you read Wainwright, you read Rhodes, you really get a feel for what these people were going through. Yeah. And that's Elsie just quoted Abner Small. The Army hospital was an institution never to be forgot by a patient. Between the sick man and eternity, there was only a thin canvas which flapped restlessly in the wind, as if impatient to open its loose seams and to let some tired spirit through. And that's another quote that Mark had. I mean, I've mentioned Abner Small's diary on this thing a million times. If you haven't read his diary, part of the 16th Maine, in my opinion, and again, opinion not fact, it's the best, by far best first account story I've written about the American Civil War, because he kind of takes the myth away about the glorious fighting and all the stuff he does. He talks about the real time stuff. Yeah, where he says, I'm going to paraphrase, the war was 10 feet in front of you with 10 feet left and right. That was your war. Yeah. You didn't, and I made this example many times because I like football. It's like the left guard trying to explain what the receiver on the right flank is doing. He doesn't care. His job is right in front of him. So to look at the Civil War as a big sort of panorama is a false way to look at it from the soldier's perspective. And he's very vivid. That quote about the veil is very it's powerful.
Yeah.
But his book is not hard to find, but it's expensive on Amazon. It's probably like $50 or something. But I'd go ahead and read it because it's one that
another way you can get it too is if you go to your local library. Odds are they're part of interlibrary loan. They can get it in for you from another library. Like I know the library that I work at, we do interlibrary loan, and there's like literally hundreds of different libraries you can get stuff from. Leonard mentions also the human stories of the civilians, and he mentions like the trapped population at Vicksburg and reading their diaries and letters and chilling. And those are people that during the siege, they had to like live in the side of mountains and they were eating dogs. Like that's how bad it got. They were using wallpaper for newspaper. So they could have people could have news to read. And Jeff Shara in his book, I can't remember now, but it's the first one in his Western Theater, the 4-book series he wrote. There's a female character in there. She's a civilian of Vicksburg. I think she's based off a real person. And the way he writes her, like it's so chilling what she has to go through, that she goes from being, I think she's pretty well off to like, she's living in a cave by the end of it.
Yeah, I mean,
and that's those stories too, like the civilians, what they're going through.
The Vicksburg story is a powerful story. It's a horrible story. The Petersburg story is horrible. And people chide Mary Chestnut's diary for a lot of different reasons. But the thing about when you read her diary, the one thing it does come across is the fear, right? Especially about Sherman, about what's happening next. Reading Mary Chestnut's diary is very similar to reading a lot of the stories that were floating around on 9/11 here, right? Where you don't know what the hell's going on. There's all these stories popping up left and right. You don't know if it's true or not, but it's that's why her diary is good too. And she's she is what she is. I enjoy it. I personally
do too. I think her diary has a great place in the history of the Civil War because it's a civilian, a high off one, she's well off, what she's going through during it, and she's writing down her feelings at the time, which if any of us go through, I mean, think of us when we start going through the pandemic, how would our diaries read now? We'd be writing down what we felt at the time. We'd be writing down, when am I going to be able to go outside again? Like,
I can imagine your diary. Oliver Otis Howard, the Christian general. You'd be drawing little pictures like he did.
Hey, he was a good artist.
Oh God, he actually was. But
he wrote his wife a letter the day after he got his arm amputated to let her know she was coming home. And I mean, I get it. He's in a lot of pain and he's learning to write with his left hand, like literally 12 hours after he gets his arm taken off. And it looks like a 2-year-old.
Yeah, try writing with your opposite hand.
Yeah.
But to Howard's credit, though, if you look at his later stuff, it's pretty good. I mean, he definitely, definitely. Although because his arm didn't grow back, Mary. I don't know if you know that. It doesn't grow back, unfortunately.
History buff said, what will people think of us in 100 years when there's no diaries, just Twitter posts? Oh,
God. Well, people could be clearing their history cache before they die, hopefully. So they'll probably take care of everything. But no, I don't think anybody keeps. I never get down. I said tired, but what that does, what a diary does give you, and a lot of times people say, well, a diary's not correct because it's wrong, because it's not. Well, you know something? To them at that moment, that was their reality.
That was what they were feeling, and there's emotion in it, and all this other stuff.
It gives you an insight into what they felt at the time, which is it's a very human thing. And I the other diary I mentioned a lot is the Charles Wainwright diary, the artillerist, the Union artillerist, and his diary is fantastic because he's one of the many diaries who never intended for it to be published.
Yeah.
So he talks about it on a very snide type of scale on certain things, and his story at the first day at Gettysburg about the seminary is one of my favorite ones because he's talking about, he's told to fall back to the cemetery because the rule was, Howard set up the cemetery hill, everyone get back there as fast as you can. Well, a German soldier is the one telling him this, and he has a very heavy German accent.
Yeah,
and he talks about, get back to the cemetery. And he goes, I don't understand a word the guy's saying. I turn around, there's a seminary. I guess that's what he means, a seminary. So because of that accent, according to Wainwright anyway, he's going to set up his guns there. What's going to happen? That's going to help slow Perrin those South Carolinians now.
Yeah.
So because of an accent, he actually buys time for more troops to fall back when by all accounts, he was supposed to fall back himself. And that's what's cool about history is little caveats that happen because of little things like an accent.
Yeah, Elsie says the diaries are micro histories, which matter just as much as the macro histories.
Yeah, and whether who knows if it's true or not, but but that's what he wrote, and that's in his mind. That's what it was. And there's a couple other good stories, especially about that part of the battlefield where somebody was writing. There was who the hell must have been, but there was a Confederate like a captain or someone like, I'm blanking on his name. I haven't thought about this in a while, but there was a very religious soldier in his company, and this is the first day at Gettysburg. So this is right when everything's going on with the Iron Brigade, and he tells him to go and charge. Yeah, and the guy's like is afraid, and he goes, I don't understand. He goes, you're a religious guy. You've been talking about meeting God every day I've known you. You have a chance today, and now you don't want to do it. Little things like that are just fun stories. There's a story where another soldier's fallen back. He's a Confederate, and he's been wounded, and he's running back, and he's yelling, "I've been killed! I've been killed!" He wasn't, because he hurt his arm, and he yelled. And I think it might have been that same captain. He yells to the medic, "Go and chase that dead man if you can catch him." Little things like that are just fun human stories you could picture happening today. Yeah. But that's why it's great to read these accounts, because it's just fun reads. They just are.
Yeah. Frank does something really cool. He keeps a journal that he writes, and every time he visits a battlefield, just to record how he was really feeling in his favorite places. That's really cool.
No, that stuff like that's important though. Yeah.
You look back on it, and I mean, I kind of wish I'd do something like that, because the first time I went to Gettysburg or Chickamauga, writing down how you feel at certain places. Like, I know there's certain places that have different energy, or that you find more peaceful than others, like just the energy at Bragg's headquarters, for example. Right. Or there was a certain energy at Alexander's Bridge, which was very like where Wilder's guys were as well. I don't know if you felt it there or not.
No, there definitely is. The problem with Chickamauga, we went there, Mary, was it was pouring. I know. Pouring.
That's why we have to go back.
Yeah, and it's one of those things, you step on the grass, you sink 3 inches into the mud.
Yeah, because we couldn't even get out to Hood's wounding site. We were just not very far from it.
Pretty sure my shoes were killed at Chickamauga that day.
Mine
correctly.
Mine were too. Yeah, it was so much rain.
Quality of ice, if you don't do this. Anytime you go to a battlefield, bring an extra pair of shoes. Yep. Bring your battlefield shoes and your regular shoes. Yep. I always wear the socks. I always wear crappy sneakers when I visit battlefields because you ruin them. You absolutely ruin them, and that's fine. That's totally cool. One thing I do is I have my sword, and I'll take it and I'll stick it in the ground every time I do battlefields. Get a little battlefield dirt on it.
You couldn't take it to Chickamauga, unfortunately, because we flew there.
Yeah, I know, but this way, just a little bit of dirt on it, just battlefield dirt. And some people, like Ben Frail, give me shit for not cleaning my sword, but I do that for a reason. That's how I do it. But that's fun. Speaking of Frail, by the way, where the hell is he? I ran into his second Rhode Island at the mine, his reenactor group, and it was so funny because we're sitting there. It was the night when you were there with Jen Rowling.
And Chris.
That might have been the night we stranded MJ to die on the vine with those creepy people. It might have been that night, actually, MJ. I apologize for that, by the way. But I was talking to these reenactor guys, and I said, "Who do you guys reenact with?" And he goes, "Second Rhode Island." I go, "You must know Ben Frail." Then they started laughing. Yeah, we know Ben Frail. And it turns out one of the reenactors is a guy we drank with in Providence one night. I didn't recognize because it was Joe. And so we did a picture in mocking Frail for not being there for the anniversary of Gettysburg for the reenactment. So it's funny that people.
He had been there the weekend before, but it was cool to see all the people dressed up. We dressed up, which was fun.
We did, but it's fun. It's fun running into people. The people you meet sometimes is what's great about places like that. But I'm gonna give Frail shit for that eternally. Yeah. So next time Team Wheaton pops in here, well, Wheaton would have been at Gettysburg.
Yeah,
he wasn't.
It's funny. But so we really enjoyed the anniversary. It was really cool to be there. And like I said, I would love to be at Chickamauga for an anniversary sometime. And then next year, 2024, you have more 160ths happening. You have like Overland, Monocacy, Cedar Creek. I would love to go to the Monocacy 160th.
No, I think we need to do that because that's pretty good timing. I think I'm getting dragged to Canada the previous weekend though, but maybe you know, maybe we can make that happen because I think Monocacy 160 would be cool. It'd be cool to see Matt Borders. I'm sure he'll do something cool with that. But there's a lot of great ones, and 64 actually, you know, for people who study the 1864, you realize the brutality of what was going 64. It got progressively worse every single year. It really did, but 64 was the you're
Franklin
talking over
160th, which is what Frank mentions now. That would be one to go to. David said he's going to Franklin, Nashville next year. The Franklin 160th would be one to go to because that is high on my bucket list. Obviously, Miranda mentioned Newmarket.
Overland would be cool. The problem is you could Spotsylvania would be great. Cold Harbor, I don't want to say it's disappointing a little bit because there's not a lot to it compared to the other ones. But Spotsylvania would be I think Spotsylvania 160 mirrors where our asses should be at. By the way, I think we should make that happen.
Yeah, I agree. Definitely, and try I would love to be there for Franklin for the 160th. That would be bucket list right there.
Yeah, no, maybe we'll see how everything plays out.
Because that would be
schedules,
I don't know. That is a battlefield we need to visit, anniversary or not.
Nashville is disappointing. I've been to Nashville, and there's not a lot left in Middle.
It was disappointing for Hood too.
It certainly was. No question about that. Good day for the USCT though. It certainly was for them. But it was Nashville was disappointing as far as that goes. But I love Nashville. Nashville's a great city though.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see if Appomattox really highlights the fact that they have Claiborne's jacket there for the 160.
By the way, speaking of Nashville, forget Broadway. Go to Printer's Alley if you go to Nashville. That's where the good bars are. Good blues bands in the basement. Forget Broadway is the tourist trap. But go to Printer's Alley. That's the place to go if you go to Nashville.
Miranda mentions Franklin is incredible, and that's what I've heard from anybody who's been there. That it's an extremely I don't know, it's haunting, I think. And also just you go into that one building where there's all the bullet holes and just the the story behind it. Leonard mentions Mobile Bay 160 beach vacation and battle anniversary.
Well, that's a good one. Well, like we say many times, all battlefields matter. Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
I said it many times. But this 2023 and 2024 is a big year.
Yeah, and you have the March to the Sea as well. That the 160th.
You've got the Sherman stuff. You've got everything going on. Obviously, Franklin. Overland's the big one as far as in the East goes. So, but there's all kinds of little places to go.
Yeah, in the West, I think the big ones are going to be like the March to the Sea. We'll see how the Georgians handle that one.
Oh, I'm sure they'll handle that pretty well. Maybe they'll have Tom Brady at the front waving as he goes through Atlanta. Maybe they'll do that. Maybe they'll do that. Really,
I was reading Carpenter's bio and Howard yesterday, shockingly doing research, and he is not kind to Sherman in it. Like he says there was, he doesn't say like they destroyed everything, but he said it was very almost traumatizing for the Georgians in Sherman's path. And Howard tried to stop a lot of the destruction. He finally said to Sherman, I can't stop these guys. I just can't. And a lot of it was stragglers who were not really in the army, but then you had the bummers that their official detail. And Sherman was brilliant in this. So he picks the soldiers that had been accused of stealing before, that had been accused of sneaking out. And he said, I have a job for you guys, and I know you're going to be perfect at it. I need you to go to houses and bring back food, whatever else. But then these guys come back at the end of the day and they're dressed up. Some of them are dressed up in dresses and stuff, like they stole clothing. And it was like, O'Connell talks about it in his Sherman biography, which is one of the best accounts about, he writes really well about the March to the Sea. There was like a circus and entertainment for the guys coming back. And
of course it was. I mean, these are 20, 21-year-old dudes.
And they're like, dude, we're getting loose on.
I mean,
there was no chance of, there was little chance of fighting. And Carpenter says it was basically like a holiday for them. They're like, wow, we're going to stroll through the Georgia countryside. And like, they just,
all right,
that's what they did.
Okay. I think what we need to do, make an executive decision right now. We haven't talked about this. We have to do Wilderness, Spotsylvania next year. We have to. Have to. That's happening. Okay,
Okay.
so that's what we're doing. So we're going. So that'll be early May next year. I'll be taking a vacation that week. We'll be head down to Spotsy in Wilderness. We'll do the 160th, and then of course the that brewery that's over there.
Yeah. Yeah. David said I'd wear a Sheridan hate shirt. So would I.
Sheridan, you know, he's. I mean, like we said this before. He's
overrated.
just. Well, no, he's definitely overrated. There's no question. As much because, but I mean, I guess he's got statues and this and that, but he's just such a dick. He just was. And he just, you know, there's just, he reminds you of somebody I know who I just drives me up a freaking wall.
Yeah.
And a short little mouthy opportunist who stabs people in the back and screws people over.
Yeah.
But just when you think he finally fell on his dick, he does something,
victory.
and then it's like, then they reset the scale again, and it goes, and that's who he is. So,
and then he's like, well, I can have a few more like, you know, losses, but they'll keep me around if I get.
And it surprised me, you know, his personality was such that, I mean, him and Meade were Meade was no picnic either, as per with George Meade as far as personality goes, but that friction of everything that went down after the Wilderness is going to allow Grant to tell Sheridan to GTFO and go chase down Jeb. Do you realize how risky that was? The fact that he's going to expose his army, take all the cavalry away, heading into the Battle of Spotsylvania.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if the Confederacy, and I'll tell you something, if Lee doesn't pull those guns on the Muleshoe, and the Union gets slaughtered at Spotsylvania, that's going to be on Grant for letting Sheridan leave. Because if you study the beginning part of the Battle of Spotsylvania, when you talk about Hancock's guys getting lost in the woods and the night before, and that the march they had to do, what a disaster that was. If the Confederacy was able to, if Ewell's guys were able to hold back that Muleshoe and they had their artillery, they left them with 5 guns, 5. To hold back Barlow and all those people, disastrous it could have been. You want to talk about a what if in the American Civil War is what if Lee leaves the guns in Spotsylvania at the Muleshoe? Yeah. Right. But that's all because of a personality strife. Yeah. Between him.
That's what a lot of this is when you dig down into it. Like Sheridan, it was a lot of personality issues, like between him and Warren, of all people. Right. I mean, Warren's kind of a prick too. I mean, but when Sheridan goes east with Grant, suddenly you've got the 2 biggest egos in the Union Army, Sheridan and Warren, in one place, very small place. And you can't it doesn't work. And I will always be Team Warren. I know Warren made his mistakes too, but he didn't make as many as Sheridan. And Sheridan, was like little lapdog. And for Gouverneur K. Warren to be buried in his civilian clothing because he's like, F this.
Well, Warren didn't do anything. I mean, you want to talk about Lee's retreat from Petersburg at that Appomattox campaign, you know, Amelia Courthouse, all this stuff. Yeah. He does nothing wrong. No, he doesn't. I mean, he does everything right. I mean, he's nipping at the heels of Lee as he's going. Yeah. And then you got Sheridan saying, well, this guy might be doing too good. I'm going to have to get rid of this dude.
Yeah. I'm going to have to scoot him over. And I mean, if you want to visit a sad grave, visit Gouverneur K. Warren's.
And you go see the Stevens guys too.
Yeah.
Isaac
and Hazard.
Isaac, who was killed at Chantilly, and Hazard, who was the first guy to climb Mount Rainier. Well, random things. Okay. But they're buried next to each other, but they're in the same area, and down in Newport, Rhode Island. But again, that's why it's important to study the personalities, because you sit there and say, well, why the hell did Sheridan leave the army and leave him with no cavalry to go chase Stuart? Makes no sense. Well, if you realize his personality with Meade,
what's going on,
then it does make sense. Because Grant was like, you two go, just get away from each other.
You need to be in separate rooms
with your kids. Go away. Go other side of the room. And Grant really rolled the dice with that. He doesn't get enough credit or discredit for that, because that could have been bad. That could have been real bad.
But does it really matter in the end? Like how significant is Jeb Stuart's death? Are we going by what Sheridan wrote about it, which was like, I did the greatest thing ever, or when you look at what it costs.
Well, the one guy who I consider the smartest person on the Battle of Spotsylvania is Chris Makowski. And he says this, he says, was Jeb Stuart's death worth 10,000 Union deaths? And that's the eye of the beholder. Was it worth it or was it not? One thing he did do, though, and I will give Sheridan credit for this, is he went to Jeb Stuart's hometown.
Yeah.
And parked his ass there where his wife and kids were, knowing that was going to pull Jeb out. So if you want to attack Sheridan, knock yourself out. But he was smart how he handled that.
He was. No, I give him credit for certain things. I just don't like him as a person. I don't like what he did to Warren. I don't think it was fair. I think Warren was a far better soldier than he was. But the personality clashes, like talking about 64, going to the Western Theater, you see the similar things happening as well, especially when Hood takes command and there's suddenly like, we need scapegoats or whatever, or you bring down shitty commanders because they're your friends, S.D. Lee, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
like
absolutely.
At Ezra Church, you bring down S.D. Lee, who is his own campaign manager for, look, I did amazing things. And where was it? Tupelo?
Yeah. And which
was a loss. And he's like, it was a victory.
I mean, ego was a big thing. We talked about Longstreet a little while ago with everything going on with him, with taking the gold from Richmond. But, during Petersburg, he had an idea. He had a meeting with Edward Ord. Mm-hmm. And they wanted to do a military conference to try to solve it, just end it. And so he tried to use his personal relationship with Grant. Longstreet was very close to U.S. Grant. They were 1842, 1843 from West Point, but they were close. They were bros.
Yeah.
And they would try to do let's get the generals together to end this right now. And it was Edward Stanton said, no effing way. Your job is to fight. Us politicians, we'll solve that. We'll do the peace. But they tried to basically come up with an armistice in Petersburg. And Washington and Jeff Davis both said no to it. And which pissed off people like Longstreet, pissed off people like Lee. So we talked before about the generals knew the war was over, but the politicians didn't. And then that little peace conference that was supposed to happen, that was pretty much it. It led to, like we said before, it led to Farmville, Amelia Courthouse, it led to Appomattox, that whole thing. Yeah. And all those deaths that happened were because the politicians, they kept, Lincoln and Stanton telling Grant, no, you keep going. And Davis, he was afraid of being hanged. He's like, you keep going as long as you possibly can.
Davis just kept going as the fire. He's like that dog sitting there saying, this is fine.
But it puts you into the mindset of a Robert E. Lee when you knew it was over. It's like you're sitting there at a baseball game, you're down 14-1 to the Orioles a couple of nights ago, and you're trying to think about what you're going to do. The game is over, but you got to keep playing, even though you just want to stop it right there.
Yeah.
But that's you got to be able to distinguish the generals from the politicians, right? And that's a big part of it. But that war in the East could have ended in Petersburg if Longstreet and Lee, and eventually, Longstreet and Grant, and eventually Grant and Lee could have come up with a plan right then to be done. But the politicians wouldn't let it. They made them keep fighting.
So there's a great comment from Leonard. That's why I was laughing. He said Bowen tried to pull the friends and neighbors card on Grant at Vicksburg. They refused to a friends and neighbors card.
Yeah.
And then CD said, how much of Sheridan was just pissed at Stuart? Like, there's so much personal versus tactical. And LC said Sheridan reminds me of an annoying Joe Pesci character, even as the same act.
Yeah. Well, Sheridan and Stuart was a dick measuring contest. It was. Yeah. It was, okay. And Stuart's this cavalier. And the image of Jeb Stuart you have today is the same image they had back then.
Yeah.
And Sheridan, he ended up taking over, going to infantry, but at the time he wanted to beat the big fish. You want to beat the bully on the block. So he wanted to go get Stuart. And he used that personal animosity with Meade to get buy-in from Grant to do it. And you can imagine George Meade sitting there going, are you friggin' kidding me? You want me to take my Army of the Potomac? We're going to race the Spotsylvania Courthouse, those crossroads, without cavalry? And you seriously?
And Grant's like, okay.
Grant's like, yeah, well, fuck it, YOLO.
Yep.
But that's why you end up with these stalemate battles like Spotsylvania. Yep. Cold Harbor was a big win for the Confederacy, but with this basically a 2-to-1 man advantage, the terrain in the communications and the weather for the most part, helped keep Lee in the game. And when you look at Cold Harbor, when he had no reserves behind him, being able to beat him, and that's by sure it had returned by then middly, but Spotsylvania could have been a bad day for Mother, right? Oh. Very easily, and it ends up being basically a stalemate.
Yep.
All because of personal shit.
Yeah, and like I said, in the Western Theater, the personal shit is happening too. It's been happening, especially with Bragg and the Army of Tennessee. You know, and I mean, I had someone tried to tell us on Twitter that, you know, they were like, but people liked Bragg. And I'm like, okay, yes, they did. But I mean, survey says that if your subordinate generals are signing a petition.
Survey says?
Oh, yeah. MJ, okay. But survey says if your commanding or your subordinate generals are signing a petition, not one, but 2 times to oust you, you might not be well liked.
Well, that's a big part of it too, and you know, Bragg was what he was. He did some good things. He's not the complete, you know,
no, he's not a complete train wreck that people say he is. But you know, you have these personality clashes, like you have Bragg and Forrest, which I know there's that letter or discussion, whatever it was, confrontation that happens that some people say did not happen, which was Forrest walking in and basically saying like, no more. You took some of my men for Wheeler. We're not doing this anymore. And it's an amazing, like, just.
Oh yeah, I mean,
great insult.
You know, we mentioned bring Longstreet back into this again. You want to talk personality? I mean,
okay. He goes out west like, I'm going to take over Army of Tennessee.
Well, I mean, he has the issue with Gettysburg, and that you can go back and forth on that. But I mean, when he gets sent west, I mean, he ends up. You forget about the battle of Knoxville. We talked about this. You probably forgot about this one too, Mary. But I mean, he ends up going up to Knoxville. And don't forget that fort. And it was the wintertime where they're pouring water on the ramparts. It makes it ice, remember? Yeah. And they can't climb up the friggin' ice. Longstreet goes, fuck this. And he goes into winter quarters for the rest of the time. He goes, I ain't doing this anymore. He's like, this is ridiculous, a waste of time. So he's like, where'd Longstreet go? Well, he's in camp now. He's not coming back. He's like, I'm done with this.
He went out west thinking he was going to be able to take over command.
Well, he goes west like he's Apollo Creed, right? Yeah. And he goes out there and he does great at Chickamauga. No question he does.
Oh, he does.
But then after
I have to give credit to Hood though for Chickamauga.
No, I know. But then he goes from there and he gets sent up to Knoxville. And it just doesn't work out. And at that point, instead of falling back, he just says, we're just staying here. We're just gonna stay here. It's like you at the bar. I don't want to go to the bar. Let's just stay here for the night. You know, just set up for the rest of the night. So that's what
bar with good IPAs.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And then finally he does come back east, but he went out there with the assumption that he was gonna be a man out there. And he needed to get away from Lee there for a little while, but I think he realized, he said, you know something, this Lee guy might be pretty friggin' good, because this whatever
goes out to the Western Theater where it's like, holy shit, this is messed up.
He goes out to the land of the misfit toys from Bragg's army, the Army of Tennessee, and he looks around and he has an initial success at Chickamauga, and then he goes up to Knoxville and he doesn't do too well there. And he gets criticized for that, but he's like, I'm not going back to Bragg.
But I think he sees how messed up Army of Tennessee is and how the politics are playing into it.
Yeah.
Like Davis comes down after that second petition and they have this kind of come to Jesus chat, all of them, all the subordinates are there, Bragg's there, Davis is there. And okay, Davis is like, okay, air your grievances, what's going on? And everybody's like, we need to get rid of this guy. They all leave except Davis and Bragg. And Davis is like, you know what? I'll give you one more chance.
I mean, that's the thing. They have this. They have this Festivus airing grievances meeting, right? And they all sit there and go, "Yeah, he sucks." Okay, what about you? He sucks. Okay. Then they all leave and they go, "You know something? I'm going to keep you in charge." And they're all like, "You friggin' kid!" But that's when
Hardy is like, you know what?
Well, then fine. Yeah,
Hardy eventually is like, no.
Hardy's like that SpongeBob meme. Is like, well, I'm out of here. You know. And then it ends up obviously Joseph E. Johnson takes over. We talked about that, the Atlantic campaign.
Oh wait, no, Hardy stays in under Joseph E. Johnson, and then
right, but he eventually
come in when
he eventually says enough is enough with all this stuff. He sees everything going back, but it is fun seeing how the personal opinions of these people in general. it plays a huge part in this. It really, really does.
But you have like all these generals ending up leaving, or they get killed, like Polk.
Can you imagine William Hardy, who literally wrote the book on tactics, sitting there with Tullahoma, with Bragg, going, "Are you shitting me? We retreated. We basically gave up this position without almost a shot because Wilder's was coming through the gap there, and we ignored them. But that's what happens. And I don't want to rip on Bragg too bad because Jacob's bat signal will go off.
Yeah.
But I mean the reality is he was fighting a multi-front war. And I think Longstreet was a big part of that because Longstreet was he ran as he did.
Longstreet was like the gossipy girl in high school.
And so you can love Longstreet like Corey Farr. You can hate him like Bob Crick. Whoever you want to read and study. But I think the reality was Longstreet was definitely an opportunist on a lot of different levels.
Yeah.
But he was also a good soldier. He was. He
was very good. And I think he just went out there and he was like, I'm going to take over. And then he was like, looked around. He's like, you know what? No, this is Army of Tennessee has been a mess literally since Albert Sidney Johnston was killed. And and I think a huge part of it was not keeping Beauregard around, letting him go. I think that was kind of what screwed them over. And then you have Bragg coming in. I think if they had kept Beauregard around, Beauregard as we call him, things might have been a little different. But then again, Beauregard is a soldier who literally cannot let go of a textbook. If it's not written in a textbook as a tactic, he doesn't know how to do it. But I do wonder, like reading the biography about him, if he would have evolved and eventually changed and been like, you know what, maybe we need to think outside the book.
Yeah, no, a lot of it goes back to how you were taught at West Point. I mean, if you had Dennis Mahan, you thought a certain way because you studied a certain way. But a lot of the Clausewitz stuff didn't come out till later. So they studied a lot of Jomini. And so you can see why a lot of the better generals in the American Civil War didn't go through West Point. Because to your point with Beauregard there, right? I mean,
he's hell bent on being by a book.
They're going to go literally by the book. And you look at guys like Claiborne, right? Specifically, a lot of them, they just had it. They learned on the fly of what they were trying to do.
Yeah. And pardon the bells ringing in the background. That is the third time that the church bells are ringing today in our neighborhood. 3 times. Starts at 7:20 in the morning.
Nothing better than bells at 7:20 in the morning.
Yeah,
but that's the thing though, is you can see, okay, this guy was taught a certain way.
Yeah.
Now Dennis Mahan, he had there was a lot of positives he's taught because he taught those Confederates how to build those forts at Fort Fisher, right? Battery Wagner, those sand forts, who helped a big part of that. So there's nothing wrong with the book learning. As they say in the movie,
reading
right?
about that in the Beauregard biography from the Confederate side of it was really interesting. He does a great telling of like what Beauregard is doing, what's going on during Fort Wagner and how he's like, we need to protect this. Like, we can't lose this. And then when he finally was like, we have to let it go, sort of thing. But I do think like the more I read about him and the more I study in the Western theater, I don't think Albert Sidney Johnston getting killed is a huge thing. And I think one of the reasons we think that is by how Davis perceived him. But then you have to think about who Davis put in command. And was Albert Sidney Johnston really that good? But I think the biggest thing for the Army of Tennessee was Beauregard being chained to a desk after.
I mean, look, we'll never know. I mean,
that's my opinion, is Beauregard being chained to a desk is probably what hurt Army of Tennessee more than Albert Sidney Johnston being killed. Because a lot of what is happening, when Albert Sidney Johnston is command, is Beauregard influencing him and saying, I think we need to do it this way. I think we need to do this.
Well, Beauregard, he was the perceived smartest man in the room in most places he was in. He was right, but he also he was what he was.
Yeah, too tied to the book, I think.
Obviously he's got his history with Richard Anderson and at Sumter, the artillery, West Point. There's a lot of history with him. But the problem is we talked before about the early part of the war. You and I talk about McClellan a lot, where maybe he gets unfairly hit for the whole being slow thing, because of how the condition of the army was at the beginning.
Yeah,
Beauregard gets a lot of shit because he fought early too.
Yeah.
You know, when you're spiking the ball on day one of Shiloh, and then you get your ass kicked on day two.
Oh yeah.
But what got him was when he fell back out of Corinth, Mississippi, when he set up those Quaker logs and retreated in the face of the enemy, which most military people will tell you was the hardest thing you can do.
Yeah.
But that's what got him in Davis's doghouse, was falling back out of giving up Corinth, though.
Davis
That vital railroad hub of Corinth. He fell back out of that. And so at that point, he's like, in my office now. And he stayed there until the end, when there was a rolling biohazard of junk he kept putting in there, right?
Meanwhile, he's got this guy at a desk that might be good. But the thing is like, so Beauregard leaves Corinth for a variety of reasons. One is the soldiers are getting sick. And then he leaves, and then he's like, why were the soldiers getting sick? And Beauregard's like
because they're drinking the green water.
Yeah. And Beauregard's like,
don't drink the pond water if it's green.
Yeah.
I mean, some things you should be taught at a young age. Don't drink the green pond water, but that's okay.
Like there's stories of the soldiers literally, they had to hold, like, pinch their nose as they drank it because it was so bad. So
you drank worse. You drank worse.
I have. Yeah. I'm sure I have. That's why I'm alive today.
Usually leads to a full call me maybe situation, but that's another story. But that's the thing. And so people, again, it all goes back to personalities and how you feel about people. Not, we've talked a million times about Grant and William Rosecrans with that.
Yeah.
It goes back to Battle of Iuka. Now that was Rosecrans' fault for going to the media.
He should not have gone to the media.
He should not have done that. He should not have done that. But again, this is what happens. These stories of guys like Rawlins and Charles Dane, I say, Grant getting banged up, before the Vicksburg campaign, and the shit sticks. It just does.
Yeah, but Grant probably did.
Well, he probably did, but what ends up happening is Dane and Rawlins end up basically covering for him.
Yeah.
Because they realize that maybe the drinking thing's not that big of a deal. No. He's the type of guy who has 2 shots and he's hammered.
Remember you explained microwave drunk to
he was a microwave drunk. That's what we call him.
What's that? It's like, how you put something in the microwave for 30 seconds. And that's what he was. And it goes back to the reputation, going back to Henry Donaldson, where he probably did drink a bit, but he's also missing his family. Yeah.
I mean, it's a hard situation. Sherman had to beg him to stay in the Army.
Yep. Yeah. That's the thing. And Sherman needed him there because they were best friends. They got each other. Ryan mentions Beauregard doesn't get to show how much he might have learned after Bull Run, and after screwing up plan for Shiloh, he might have turned into another Joseph Johnson, retreat competently all the time.
I'll give a credit for this for Beauregard, Beauregard as we call him, is when when the shit was going bad at the Hornets' Nest, he rode right up the front. He had his sword over his head on his horse. He was right at the front of his men.
Yeah.
I'm going to win this battle or die trying. He didn't fall back. He wasn't a coward. He realized, admittedly, did he know that Don Carlos Buell's Army of the Ohio was steaming the Pittsburgh Landing? Probably not.
That's the thing, and that's why he has that.
They did know they were coming. I don't think they realized they got there as fast as they did.
Yeah.
But that 2 days of the rain, that slowed him down. Otherwise, history changes. But again, he messages back to Richmond, says, "We got this. We're done." But when he realized that the Army of the Ohio showed up and everything was changing, and speaking to Lew Wallace, he finally is going to show up, right?
Yeah.
And now the Union is going to push back on them. He's right up front. He's not in the back hiding, and so he deserves more credit than he gets. And he's one of those guys who was left in the bullpen too long, in my opinion, anyway. Who the hell knows? But that's
I agree. Have a great day, MJ.
MJ, we will talk to you soon. Hope you're feeling better.
Yeah. But I do agree with you about Beauregard. He's left there too long. He finally gets out. I mean, it's him and Hardee at Savannah, and they're the ones that are like, you know what, we need to just let Sherman take the city.
Well, they were smart about that. They were. You
know who made the plan for Fort McAllister?
Who's that?
Howard.
Yeah, he did.
He was the one, and that was the one time that they realized they had to go full frontal.
Ooh.
Yeah, they had to go full frontal in that attack. And the Atlanta campaign, the March to Sea, any battles have been kind of like the flank attacks other than Kennesaw in the Atlanta campaign. But that was McAllister was Howard was the main one behind that plan, and Sherman put him on that. But you have
Mhm.
Hardy, who the connection with Hardy and Howard is quite prominent. They're very close. They're very good friends. When Howard was a math professor at West Point, Hardy was also there, I think, as a professor.
Your old job.
Yeah, math. Yeah, I'm no. Anyway, as we've talked about many times, Howard is the math teacher for Hardy's kid.
Mhm.
And he even helps him, like, outside of class, like he's kind of his math tutor or whatever. Anyway, they're very close. And then Hardy's kid gets killed at Bentonville because Hardy's finally like, okay, yeah, you can have your chance at the battle. He doesn't think it's going to be that bad. There was a Confederate soldier that comes through to tell Howard, I just want to let you know Hardy's kid was killed.
Yeah, I mean, Bentonville was one of those battles, and right towards the end, and so it was a waste of life, and that
So
was
was Franklin. It begins with Franklin.
Franklin was. I mean, you can point to that on the map or the calendar of when they probably should have stopped. But Franklin certainly was, but Bentonville, absolutely. Bentonville's post-Appomattox, right?
Yeah.
April 26th, 1865 is when they finally quit. The same day Booth was killed. Yeah. So it doesn't make sense why that would have happened. But you feel bad for Hardy.
Oh, yeah. First of all, he's, finding out that his best friend has been killed at Franklin. And I think that factored into his decision to go to Beauregard and say, we need to leave Savannah. No more. Yeah. Like, this has been not just Claiborne, but there's been 5 other guys, like Hiram Granberry, States Rights Gist, Othel Strahl. Who was the other guy?
John Adams.
Yeah, all killed.
I mean, and again, these are young guys who could. I mean, Hiram Granberry was
32.
30. Yeah, he's early 32 and young guy. And so that's the reality. Is a lot of people were killed who they were, especially that point where, who knows? I mean, how Granberry might, or Adams or Strahl or Claiborne would have been post-war.
Well, but I think Claiborne would have been like a Longstreet.
He probably
and a Mosby, let's. Yeah, we lost. And I mean, because obviously Claiborne has a lot of sway in what's happening at the time. Like, Hiram Granberry is one of his best friends. Granberry might have went with him too. And I mean, Granberry's story is tragic as well. His wife had died of ovarian cancer.
Yeah.
And I think that's the only reason he came back to the Army, was because he was captured, sent to Fort Warren here in Boston. His wife goes to visit him and she starts saying, I'm not feeling well. And his cellmate was like, your wife's got ovarian cancer. They let him go because of that. And he travels around trying to find treatment for her. She eventually dies. And that's the only reason he enlists back in the Army, and he ends up getting killed at Franklin.
That's the amazing thing about it. One of those things that we don't really talk about, and we were at Fort Warren a couple of weeks ago, and it's a fantastic place to visit. Yeah. If you're in the Boston area, take the boat ride over there. There is beer on the boat. Fair warning, so you can enjoy yourself. But the fact that the Union, as soon as they said, I think my wife has cancer, they let him go. They just said, go, you're out of here.
Yeah, and he went all over the place.
He went to Baltimore first, and they could not help. He went to Mobile, Alabama, and then where she eventually died. But I mean, they didn't sit there and say tough shit. They just said, okay, we're gonna parole you right now. And I always thought that was a good human type of situation.
I almost called him Banbury because Frank said it's spelled Banbury.
Banbury, God,
because at Ringgold, if you go to Ringgold Gap, Daniel Govan and Hiram Granberry, on the stones leading up to the flag, they are called Banbury and Groven, which sounds like Muppet names, honestly.
Yeah, no, that's the thing is if you're in the deep South in Ringgold, Georgia, you could at least spell the names of your people right in concrete. I mean, spell check. I think
what happened is that was like a last minute budget item, and they're like, we don't have the budget to correct this.
Banbury and Groven, but that's the. It's like when
we were looking at it, and I was like, "Come over here." Is this spelled right?
It's like when you get a tattoo, you make sure they spell it right before, like 10 times.
Yeah.
You think before they set that in concrete, they would have done that. But that's the thing, though. We've said this before. It's all personal stories. It's all personal things. That's what I love studying this, to be totally honest, is because it's just so cool because you can relate to a lot of the same people who were fighting the mental battle that long ago, you know.
Leonard said he paid to see a Muppet Civil War movie.
Oh, can you imagine that? You could have Halleck and Stanton as those two guys in the back of the theater.
Yeah.
You know,
I don't know the Muppets well enough.
Muppets is a great thing.
I don't
Muppets.
really watch them too much. But another human thing that I found out, and this was interesting because I thought Sherman would have learned his lesson after McPherson was killed and he didn't let him go marry the fiance, is Howard asked numerous times after, I think it was, you know, once they'd been to Columbia and all that, he was like, can I go home and see my wife and kids? And Sherman's like, no. And the letters Howard has to write says, I can't. And he finally says at one point, Sherman is relentless and will not let me leave. Like, this is not me. I'm not like, I'm trying, but he won't let me leave. And I was really surprised to learn that because I figured Sherman after McPherson would have been like, you know what, go, we'll figure it out.
These guys, you know, are very devoted, and say what you will about your boy Otis there. Okay. He was a family man. And
God. The letters he writes to his kids are so sweet. He always ends it with like, you know, oh, and say hi to Orestes, who was obviously the dog.
Yeah. He has a good personality. I mean, what do you have, 8 kids?
Yeah.
I mean, a Guy was probably his personal favorite.
Guy was the first one we found out yesterday. He was killed over in the Philippines. He
helped set up Fort Ethan Allen in Burlington. Yeah. Later, he was a military guy who was killed in the Philippines. But what's interesting about the Howard family is they're they're scattered all over the world. Yeah.
But there's there's still descendants alive in Burlington.
When we went to Leeds, Maine, we found his parents, right?
His dad. His mom is buried with Guy, I think.
That's right, because she got remarried, right?
Yeah.
And she's buried with Guy out in Denver?
Nevada.
Okay. So, and then a lot of his family spread out, but we'll be heading out there to Vermont in a couple of weeks to go check that out. We'll see how that goes. You're gonna be dressed in mourning clothes for that one. I'm going to see Howard's grave. Oh my God, can you imagine?
I'm looking forward to it. That's that grave has been on the top of my list forever. So finally get out there and see it. And I've been to where he was born, and the house where he died is still there. Leonard said Muppets were born in Leland, Mississippi. Am I getting it right? Where Jim Henson lived as a kid. They have a Muppet museum and historic marker for the birthplace of Kermit the Frog.
Yeah, the Muppets. I bet Jim Henson. It's too bad he died. That's unfortunate. But I grew up with the Muppets. I love it. Miss Piggy and Kermit.
I watched the best babies.
The best part about the Muppets, you could watch it now as an adult. You pick up on all the subtle things they throw in, which is really, really cool. I definitely appreciate that. So
anyway. We are headed up to Burlington, Vermont, which also Miranda will marry widow's weeds.
I'm not sure what the hell she's going to do, Miranda, but it's going to be a highly emotional situation.
I mean, we'll do cigars there.
We'll do a Facebook Live from Howard's grave, and that'll be. You know who else is buried in that same cemetery as George Stannard?
Yeah,
he's from the Vermont, from Gettysburg. Yeah. He's buried there too. So we'll go check out his grave.
And also, it's pronounced Leland. Thank you.
Yeah, it's like Florida, Leland, Florida.
Yeah. And the other one who's buried there is Chancey Howard, who was born on May the 3rd, 1863. Battle of Chancellorsville.
Your boy Howard, he certainly got around. He certainly did. But all right, we're gonna shut this down. What do you think? It's coming around to 12. All right, so we are going to be doing the episode on Oliver Otis Howard this week. That'll be very exciting. So that'll be later this week. So look for that. We'll do this live again next weekend. So if you haven't yet, check out that Cannonballs and Cocktails that we mentioned earlier.
Yes, it's an event on our Facebook page. You'll find it on our Twitter as well as our Instagram. It's a really great cause. It'll be a great time. We're going to be doing trivia there with them, so it'll be a fun time.
No, if you go, you can wear your period gear, dress. It's going to be a lot of fun. It'll be cool. It won't be hot. It'll be on a Friday night. There's a lot of fun stuff going. I'm excited for that nighttime artillery display. That's going to be cool as hell at night. I'm looking forward to that. So hopefully you can do that, and then we'll go from there. So so I guess we're in good shape. So anything you want to say before we jump off?
Well, thank you to everybody for joining us for this silly little thing we do on the weekend.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. I mean, there's not a lot of places you can kind of get together and nerd out to talk about this stuff, which is really, really good. So again, so everybody we met in Gettysburg was great to meet you. Frank comes to mind, and a lot of
Yeah,
people.
Frank came all the way from California for this, which is really awesome.
He did, and so that was pretty cool. So it was good. It was good to see him. But get out to the battlefields. Try to get you your stuff. Enjoy all the stuff that's around, and try to stay cool. It's like I think it's hot like everywhere right now.
I know it's getting humid again. I can kind of feel it in this room I'm in right now.
Yeah,
with the windows
it's
shut.
just definitely a little sticky. It's almost it's for gentlemen, for men out there. It's a full gold bond situation. So apply liberally. You know what I mean? And we'll try to try to have a good rest of the day. All right, so let's finish up. So we'll do the Howard episode this week, and we'll do another live. I assume next weekend. We'll find out whatever the boss tells me. So we'll do it. So
well, we won't be able to do a live the weekend after because we will be doing a Facebook live when we're 2 weeks from now or from yesterday when we're in Burlington, Vermont. We will be doing a Facebook live definitely from Howard's grave, probably from the church where he attended, and as well as if we can find his home.
We can find his home. We could absolutely find his house. No question.
That he died in.
Yeah, definitely. So. Pretty cool. All right, guys, have a safe rest of the weekend. Hopefully you stay cool. Tomorrow's Monday already. How that happened?
Yep.
All right. So enjoy the rest of your week. Okay, guys. Peace out.
Yep. Thanks, guys.